welcome to the November, I think it's the 23rd meeting of the Arlington County Board, and we're meeting with our work session we do every year with our General Assembly delegation. We're meeting virtually, as we all have been doing, and this is an interesting meeting. I will just start off saying thank you to our delegation. I think you just finished the last session, right? We're now talking about the next one. That there have been times where we've gotten reports and says, is this for this year or next year? Because they're all blending together. So thank you all for what just sounded like a really crazy session. 2020 continues apace. And really want to thank you for your support. This has been such a difficult year, and you have been there for us when we've reached out to you for issues that we've been facing because of the pandemic and the need to move quickly on some things. So really appreciate you being there for us and for your support. And of course, we are joined by Pat Carroll, our legislative liaison, who runs back and forth between the two groups. And I don't know how you managed it this year, Pat. Thank you. So we're going to start off with what we called setting the stage for 2021 coming right up, the General Assembly session coming right up. And I'll ask Senator Adam Evan and Delegate Patrick Hope as the sort of deans of the delegation to talk about that a little bit with us. And then the board, we're going to go over our own legislative package and our priorities, and we'll just kind of each take different issues and go through that fairly quickly and present those to you all. I think you all have a copy of that, I hope.
Yep.
And then we'll get to a discussion. We'd like to hear from you all about your initiatives, what you want to do, and sort of a general discussion. And that will make it an evening. So with that, I think I'll turn it over right now to Senator Evan to kick us off and talk a little bit about what you see for 2021 that we ought to know about, and our residents who may be watching. So Adam, take it away.
Sure. This is going to be our shorter session, somewhere between 30 and 46 days, depending on how things play out. And economically, though, despite the sharp drop in economic activity in the last quarter of fiscal year 2020, things are looking better for the current fiscal year. We're 4 months into fiscal year 2021, and our revenue collections are better than expected. General fund revenues were up 6.7% above the same period in fiscal year 2020, which is more than $550 million. And the governor will present his budget to us on December 16th. In spite of the outlook with the numbers, there won't be much flexibility in the second year of this biennium. A lot of it has to do with salaries and bonuses that we've already allocated. And there may be, of course, additional funding needed for COVID-19 related operations in education and elsewhere in state government. What we did during the special session is we adjusted the second year budget with language authorizing appropriations of about $97 million for both state employees and state-supported local employee bonuses to be provided on September 1st, 2021, this fiscal year 2022, contingent upon year-end revenues. So those include things like a $1,500 bonus for state employees, adjunct professors' bonuses, state-supported local employees with a 1.5% bonus, and money for teachers if the trends were allow for that, and a law enforcement bonus as well. So that is a fiscal picture. We're not talking about a lot of flexibility for the governor or for us in what happens when we get back there in January. So you won't see a lot of budget news, I don't think, if things continue the way they are.
All right, thank you. I guess we'll go to Delegate Hope, and then I'll see if there are any questions for either of you, if that's all right.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And that was a good synopsis from Senator Evan. We don't have any more money in the House as they do in the Senate. So I wish that were different. But I do think that we should be grateful. I think the financial situation is probably in Virginia better off than most states. But there's still quite a few people that are unemployed and do need support. And to that end, I want to thank the board for, throughout this whole crisis and pandemic, keeping a very open lines of communication, and so we appreciate supporting the board and your leadership guiding us through this, and so we very much appreciate your leadership through this process. I think that this will be a very interesting session, but I do also think it'll be very productive, and I think building from our earlier session, our regular session in the 2020 January and February I thought was very productive, and I think the special session was also very productive as well. The interesting part is, of course, in the House, we will be entirely virtual, and I think we have some really good experience with that. Particularly, we had several hearings that we held just prior to the special session, and we learned a lot and through just trial and error of making that more efficient process. And I think we did quite a good job during the special session of going virtual. We've proved the concept, we've proved that it works, and I think we've gotten a lot of the kinks out. And I just think from the speaker's perspective, having such a large body, just in the interest of the health of not just the visitors, but the staff, the legislative staff, but also the members, we wanted to make sure that we kept their health as foremost. So it's a virtual session, and I think that there's a lot of positives to that because, for an example, we did allow us to have people literally from all over the country come in and testify, which is just not a possibility during a regular in-person session. And the number of Virginians that came and testified, I think that added a lot to the discussion for the bills, and I would expect no less. Senator Eben mentioned that, which is an unknown, whether this will be the 46-day or a 30-day session. It frankly doesn't matter to me whether it's 30 or 46-day session. We will get the people's work done, whether it's 30 days or 46 days. We will work on weekends if we have to, and if we call a meeting and we have to be there through all hours of the night, we will be there, and so will everyone on the committee have to be there. So we will make it work because there's too much at stake. The other thing that's happening in the House, which is a little unusual, is we're capping the number of bills per delegate. In typical short-term sessions, it's 15 bills. This year, it'll be just 7. And so that does make things a little bit different in terms of your agenda and what you can pursue. And I know that there's kind of a scramble to make sure that we find patrons for all these different bills and things like that. I can just speak personally that I'm already at my capacity. In fact, I reached my capacity over the summer and then some, and so I'm going to have to go back and find out if someone else can carry the bills. And I do think that this year it will be a luxury if you have a bill that has both a Senate patron and a House patron. That will be a luxury this year. Yep. So if one of my colleagues have anything to add, but that's really the perspective from the House and what's setting the table for what we're looking like when we go into session in January.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I will see if Delegate Lopez or Levine would like to add anything to this. I
think Patrick did a very good job of laying out what the limitations are going to be for us in terms of logistics and the fact that we're only going to be having 7 bills. I think we actually are doing a little bit better job in terms of transparency and taking best practices around the country, as well as a learned experience from over the summer with the special session. So people will have an ability to sign up and to testify, and there'll be a little bit cleaner of approach to dealing with how people can testify remotely, as well as submit comments on bills as well. If they can't testify in person. So I think we're looking at a very unique session. But just to reemphasize something that Patrick said, the shenanigans that are being pulled by one party are interesting. And I think what we're going to try to be doing is, you'll have 33, 34 actual business days in a 45-year session or 45-day session. We're going to have 30 days. We're going to use all 30 of those days. And so we will be working overtime. We will be working weekends to do the people's business in the middle of a pandemic. And anything less is, not worthy of Virginia General Assembly.
Thank you, Delegate Lopez. And I'll see if Delegate Levine wants to add anything. And then Senator Favola, I'll see if you want to add anything as well.
I don't have that much to add. I think Delegates Hope and Lopez and Senator Eben have basically talked about it all. I just quickly reemphasizing what my friend said. This will be an unusual opportunity for public participation. Even though we only have 30 days, one of the hardest things is when you have a bill, getting folks down to Richmond to testify, because people are working and they're busy. And a lot of times the only folks who can come are the lobbyists. Now the public really can participate from their home. And I hope we get actually a lot of public participation. I actually think this is the one advantage of a virtual session. We're going to talk about it when we get to virtual local sections as well. But I actually think it increases public participation, and I like that aspect of it.
Thank you. I think we've found that as well. Senator Favola, did you have anything you wanted to add?
The one thing I would like to add is this is not the year for large, complex bills. Because I do think, although there will be public participation in a virtual way, not having stakeholders in the room with us as committees, I'm a committee chair, so I understand the flow of the process. As you mark up a bill in a committee hearing, not being able to get sort of immediate feedback from those who might be most impacted by the bill, I think is a problem. So we're going to get the people's work done, but we're going to be very disciplined. We're going to be very clear about what problem it is we're trying to solve. And then we're going to move forward with bills that we believe would be acceptable to the other chamber without a whole lot of negotiation. So we can actually pass good legislation. So that's my message. Don't give us anything too complex or too complicated.
All right. We got a lot going on too. I don't know if we want to complexify things any more than they are already.
Yeah,
colleagues, I'll see if my colleagues have any questions. So we often have there's a hand raising feature, but I can also just kind of keep an eye out, or people can just, interrupt if there's anything my colleagues would like to ask, or we'll move on to I don't see any hands up. All right. We'll move on. I just, overall, you've received, it will not surprise you that our opening kind of general statement basically is all about funding. Please preserve the critical funding that we've got and restore some of it that got taken away. And those are kind of not surprising. And I think, as you know, overall, any more funds if we should get from the federal government, pray God that we do, that come to us, the more flexibility we have to use them, the better. It's really hard when they come packaged that you have to spend it this way and that way, and then you have to spend it by a certain time. It just makes it hard. So I know you understand that, but it bears repeating, I think. Obviously, we'll talk about education a little bit, fully funding K-12, the SOQs that we've got, cost of competing, and making sure that this funding stays up despite maybe declines in the attendance right now during COVID. Also, at last NBTA, as you remember, in 2018, some of those funds were diverted to WMATA's capital funding gap. It would be really great to have those funds back where they should be with us. And hope that we will continue to support transit despite there's a fall in projected revenues because of the virus. But we have got to have transit. As you all know, transit is kind of the lifeblood of the system of this region, and we've got to keep it up. So even with COVID-19, we've got to keep that going. So finally, fully funding community services boards. There are a whole lot of issues. I think I won't go into all the now reasons that the CSBs have not been able to access all of the money with the Medicaid expansion, and yet the needs are absolutely there. But it's very difficult for CSBs to function during this COVID-19 pandemic, and they need our support. So we're hoping again for flexibility on that. And the Housing Trust Fund always. We obviously need support on housing, and that's a constant issue. So I'm going to turn it over. I have some other things to add later, but I think I'll turn it over to my colleagues, and I'll work it through by issue area and then have some discussion. Interrupt, I guess, if you've got any questions or anything like that, please do. And Katie, I'll turn it over to you first to start with transportation and finance.
Great. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you to the members of our delegation for that really helpful rundown of what to expect in this unusual session. It's clear that you all have a lot on your plates as well, and we're grateful for your representation of Arlington as well as anywhere else that may be in your districts. I wanted to share with you just a couple of thoughts on our priorities around finance and transportation. I think our chair did a nice job talking about the importance of protecting our revenue streams, and that will always be one of our top priorities. As you know well, these matter so much, particularly in an era where we're seeing, or a moment when we're seeing hits to various revenue streams. So maintaining things like the business licensing tax, protecting our real estate taxes, revenue sources, and certainly, we'll continue to advocate for sustaining those adjustments in recent years to ensuring local equal taxing authority between cities and counties. A couple of thoughts on transportation. Senator Favola, I love your point that it's not the time to do anything complex. So when it comes to WMATA, our point is really like, let's let it lay. We appreciate the dedicated funding in 2018. And specifically, in fact, there had been some discussion last session about whether to remove the caps on the growth in operating subsidies required of the payers. And in Virginia, of course, the payers are the localities compared to DC or Maryland, where the state or state-like entity is the payer. And so really appreciate those of you who are involved in not making that sort of massive change, but rather tasking the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission to study it. Specifically, you tasked me as chair of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. And so we've sent a report on to the heads of the money committees, sharing some details, some findings, some thoughts, but really encouraging that no action be taken on that cap this year. So it's not a year for complexity, and so we have a very simple request there. Continued support for the Long Bridge project. It's just in a pretty bleak moment, a true bright spot to see that transformative rail project and everything that it could mean for Arlington as a job center for Arlingtonians to be able to avail themselves of expanded passenger rail and commuter opportunities. So we continue to support that. And robots. You never know what to expect on our legislative package, but this is an important one. And so Pat Carroll has been doing yeoman's work following this. But what's really important is that we retain some ability to manage our streets and our sidewalks and our roadways. We know this is in some of the most high demand real estate in Arlington County, between deliveries, Uber pickups and drop-offs, shared mobility devices, cars, bike lanes, pedestrians. We're trying to accommodate a lot. And so it is really important to us to ensure that anything that might be using or jockeying for space in those sidewalks, that we have some local ability to regulate it. I'll stop there. I've probably gone on long enough, but appreciate your time and attention, and as always, your representation of the community.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for sharing NVTC. I mean, we've got a lot going on. Thank you. I love the way we're saying, yeah, WMATA, just keep it simple. It works. Thank you. Education, and just I took education. I've been off the school board for a long time, but I figured that the subjects look familiar to me. As usual, there's an artificial funding cap, as you probably know, on support positions, and we want to get that taken off because support positions, that really helps bring different kinds of kids up. That's really an equity issue in many ways and actually a good education issue. And please restore the inflation factor for non-personnel support costs. Also, please retain the at-risk add-on that would give additional funding based on the number of students who are at risk. And again, that's another equity issue, and that's how we provide good education for all our students and meet everybody's needs. As usual, and another one of us will be talking about mental health services later, but certainly youth mental health continues to be important, and the more school-based mental health professionals, we need some more of those. I think all of us see, sometimes we talk about tragedies and things that happen in schools, and how to solve it. Well, good mental health professionals and services is one major part to do that, so that you don't have some of these problems you need to deal with. And of course, during a pandemic, there's such stress in our communities. Also, please continue to hold harmless, as I mentioned, I think earlier, funding on sales tax distribution, despite the fact that the average daily membership is impacted by COVID-19. So please keep the funding level up. Once COVID, pray God we get that vaccine going, and then our population will come back up quickly. And we just continue to need the support in our schools. Finally, support for distance learning. And I know Christian's going to address this a little bit more. And I know you're all really familiar, broadband. And I think sometimes, I'm sure there are people in the state that think Arlington, Virginia, everybody in Arlington has access to internet, of course, right? Well, no. not. And some of that is just actually because we lack some authority to enable us to support distance learning for students in ways that we're able to actually do, but that legally we can't right now. So we're working through a lot of that, but certainly we want to have really good broadband support for distance learning for our students, and not just during the COVID-19 pandemic. Once that's done, anybody who's not connected to the internet is not connected to the world, and it's got to be like, a utility. I think we all agree, like electricity or water. So those sum up the education package, and I know our school board members talk to you, and I see hands up. Goodness gracious! I hope I can answer the question. Senator Favola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the distance learning, what specific legislative authority are you looking for? I know a little bit about this from my local government days, but I think my colleagues might be interested in hearing what.
Yeah, I think we're working around it, and because I am going to defer, I think, to our attorney on this one. I think probably Steve would be best. We have been tackling this in many different ways. I think we've made some progress. Steve, Mr. McIsaac.
Sure, Madam Chair. The fundamental problem is a Dillon rule problem. The provision of internet services to individual homes is beyond our authority. We cannot become an ISP provider. We can make available our infrastructure, but we need to end up contracting with another entity to perform tasks that are specific to the individual households, like constructing the last mile into their residence, whether it's an apartment building or an individual home. Those are considered gifts from the locality to an individual, which we are prohibited from giving. So that's fundamentally the problem. I think that we're trying to work through nonprofits that would enable us to sort of, it provides a workaround solution in a relatively narrow framework. I think something much broader along the lines of what Libby's talking about is a sort of a big decision because it involves a lot of costs. But if we were interested in going down that road, the broadband authority is available to us. But we're just not at that point yet for the relatively small scale kind of digital divide services we're trying to stand up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we actually have a consultant looking at what we might do and coming back with recommendations pretty soon. I want to see if our manager wanted to add anything. Mark, did you have anything you wanted to add, or we'll move on with more questions?
No, I'd just say that I know that we've worked with the delegation previously on where we ended up being able to essentially provide enhanced Wi-Fi services to public school students, but wired solutions would have been much more challenging for us. So that is what we have a consultant looking at. But as the county attorney said, for us to do that probably would be it requires a big investment. And I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense given the constraints we generally have by the Code of Virginia. So I don't have anything else to add beyond that.
I mean, and Senator Favola, I think, we're not asking, I think, for something right now. This is going to be a tough year, but we want you to really be aware of the issue and the workarounds that we are doing. Does that sort of answer your question? I'll go around the.
Just one quick question. Has this issue been articulated to the Broadband Commission and commissions at the state level that are actually studying?
Yeah. Let me ask Ms. Crystal, because she's been working. She's been spearheading this.
Thank you. And specifically, the governor's office on broadband has convened a working group that Arlington, both through me and then more importantly, the people with the knowledge, representatives from DTS, have been part of. And I know that they have been working. The commission, I think, just recently sent a letter to Delegate Corey, who'd asked about some of these questions, and I think it reflected to some degree a knowledge of some of the barriers about the authority proposal, but perhaps not as full of an understanding about the challenges short of launching a full authority to us in the Code of Virginia.
So it's being studied. This is not an issue we fixed this year, but going forward, perhaps.
And we've been glad to see the governor's attention to it as well. So
yeah, I think we all kind of want the same thing, but it gets, and then there's a lot of lobbying that goes on, obviously, to get in the way a little bit. So
the amount of funding, just so you're aware, I know you know this, but the amount of funding that we've been able to put in over the last 3 years has been sufficient to take us from around 600,000 people who do not have broadband in Virginia down to around 380,000 people. And so, part of this is that last mile, though, that last piece. And so the most difficult places to get it is the issue. On the macro level, I know we're talking about school access, but we are making strides.
I'm so sorry to belabor the point. If I could just jump in, Madam Chair, I just commend that so much. I mean, I think you look at the places without broadband access and they're deserts, right? It would be as akin to them not needing electrification. What I just really want to emphasize, and this is something we've talked a little bit about on that governor's task force, is I think for a long time we've looked at that issue as a rural access problem. And what we're very much experiencing in Arlington and in other population centers around the Commonwealth is an access because of affordability problem. And so that's why we've been really pushing that piece about municipal provision as part of potentially a solution there, but not to detract from the importance of rural broadband. I just want to say we have a little bit of an urban access problem too.
Yeah, and it's all cost, and it's that last, in some cases it's the last mile, and it really is a mile. In some cases it's the last few hundred feet, but it's that last bit that is just really difficult. And there are a few people, anyway, I think we all get it. Let's see, Senator Eben, and I'm sorry, Taka, Mr. Carantonis, was there something on this issue that I should ask you'd like to speak to?
Just a very short addition to that.
Yeah.
It's really also not only the ability to access, but also the ability to have the opportunity to price properly for our constituents that need it the most. From previous statistics, we know that about 40 to 45% of committed affordable housing households cannot actually afford to add to their budget a regular low service bracket subscription to any of the commercial providers. This is really critical. This is a lot of households. So these are the people who want to serve directly.
Yeah. And I think it's good that the same issue it's rural and it's urban. It's really the whole state. It's an issue. Senator Eben.
Yeah, I had a question and a request. I was going to ask the report that Ms. Crystal referenced on the Metro funding cap. If I could get access to the report or a link to the report, I'd be interested in seeing that. And the question is also for Ms. Crystal. You mentioned the robots, the ability to regulate them. Are you looking to retain authority or to acquire authority?
So I'm not going to speak too long because I think I'll make Ms. Carroll cringe since she's been the one most closely involved. I believe it is right now, the code is relatively silent on it. And so we're sort of trying to protect that interest as regulations or legislation may be crafted or come down the pike. Pat, have I got that right or did I miss
The bill passed last year, but it didn't give us the ability to regulate the robots on sidewalks. And these robots can be up to 500 pounds. So when we're saying we want to be able to monitor it, we were told by both Amazon and FedEx that they were going to launch a pilot in Virginia. We're not aware that they've done it yet, but we want to see what it is and see what the ramifications are, and then discuss whether there need to be some refinements. The patron, who was the chair of Senate Transportation, expected there to be revisions in the 2021 session, but of course, nobody anticipated what this year was going to be like. So it's probably put off for a year, but in case something should come back because of the bill that passed last year, it's in the package.
So, Senator Eben, I mean, you probably get it. It's one of these many things where we have, responsibility for safety, but not that much authority. You can imagine a 500-pound robots rolling around our sidewalks that we can't control or have some kind of code limitations on is frankly scary. So if it was a vehicle in the road, we'd have laws. But anyway, so that's I think, I don't know, Pat, jump on me if I'm misrepresenting, but I think that's
not at all. That's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Think of it as the 500-pound gorilla. Yeah. Anything else, Senator Abbott?
Literally, no. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Delegate Hope, I saw your hand up, but it's not up anymore. Are you okay?
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is an unfair question since you called on me for you or the school board, and it's about the mental health counselors.
Yeah.
And I know the school board is taking a look at the SROs, and we have a number of SROs in the county. I do have significant concerns, and we did meet with the CSB last week. I do have significant concerns about the amount of digital learning and what that's doing to mental health status, and just particularly just in ordinary normal times where students have access to see their counselor maybe once or twice a week or even on a daily basis. They don't have that same access. And I'm concerned about what's happening in the homes, and not just the fact that you're doing everything 100% virtually, what impact that will have. But to your point here on the mental health professionals, I know that's a priority of the governor. I know that we restored a lot of what we tried to do earlier in the year. I don't think we completely restored it, but I do think Arlington does have, through SROs, a way to shift resources if they so chose to. And I didn't know if you had a position on that, or is that just something that the school board is going to deal with?
School board is looking at SROs. We are cooperating. We have our own police practices group that's working, so they are coordinating with each other. I don't particularly have a position right now. I'm waiting to hear. I think Mr. Schwartz could probably tell you a little better exactly where that is right now, or maybe some of my colleagues, but I know school systems working on it, and we're working on it, and we're trying to coordinate. Mr. Schwartz?
If it's about the SRO working group, schools are going to announce the membership of that at their next school board meeting. I think that's next week. They have set a timetable of having a decision by June. It turns out that they were actually using the same people, Marcia Thompson and Julie Shedd, that we're using for the police practices group to advise them on that. And it is a slim, sleek 48-member group.
And I do know, I think even though SROs was not part of, because schools wanted to handle that themselves, so we didn't take it on with our own dialogues on race and equity and our police group, but that issue is coming up anyway. So yeah. It's definitely an important issue. And I will, Delegate Levine, I see your hand there, and I will call on you just a second. I did want to address the issue of mental health with students. You might want to touch base with our school board. I know they were starting, I don't know if it has begun, a pilot. I think Wakefield. Basically, there are some students that, they know the students are there, but they're not responding. They're not hearing from them, and that they are working to bring those students first into the building. And have some of them coming in and working in the building so that they can really have contact with those students and make sure they're doing okay. So there certainly is an awareness there that helps. Delegate Levine, you've waited very patiently. Sorry.
Yes, I have. So now there's actually a few things that have built up. So let me go back to a couple topics. On the robots, I actually opposed that bill precisely because I was afraid of your 500-pound gorilla. Although I thought they limited it to 50 pounds in one draft, but either way, I thought it was too much for you not to be able to regulate. So please let me know if anyone's going forward on that, or if you have draft language. Not that I have much room in my schedule. I don't, but maybe I could find a delegate that does. So that's something that concerns me. And then circling back to internet broadband, I had put in a bill that was sometimes you put in a strong bill just to sort of see who comes out, and I put in a very strong bill in 2020 to basically allow Arlington and any other locality to have your own internet. And the cable companies looked at me like I had banned their business. They were quite upset. But if you have, first of all, if anything's coming up, let me know. But if this is the answer is this isn't going to happen, it's too complex, not for 2021, certainly not coming from me, at least if Council Board Member Crystal can keep me informed about what's going on for 2022, I think it may be a way to chip at this piece by piece. That what I had offered, this sort of, I got rid of all the red tape, and they were like, we love the red tape. But if there's a specific way to allow Arlington, maybe just for its schools, something that you could actually use, though, I don't want to create something you can't use, but a way to chip at it piece by piece, even though I would get rid of all the red tape, Would love to work with you on that, but we could throw that off till 2022. And then the last thing is, and it maybe I have to wait till one of you announces it, but you mentioned the extension of authority to hold electronic meetings during declared emergency. You know, I've done sort of a lot of work on that, and I'm happy to chat about that, but I could wait until the proper time. I can do it now or wait.
That's coming up.
That's coming up. All right. I'll hold on that. All right.
Yep, hold on it. All right. Well, we'll have a little suspense here.
Okay.
Senator Eben, I think I see your hand up again, or is that from before? I think that's from before.
I didn't lower it. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Believe me, we've all been there. It's fine. All right. Mr. Dorsey, I think that brings us to you. We've kind of had a nice setup for you here to talk about general government and public safety, I think.
Okay, great. You'd like for me to do both together?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Sure. So I add my thanks to everyone for the hard work that you put in this year and the amazing results. The general government section, I believe section E of our document here.
D, I think, but
D. One of the items is an evergreen item, and as it should be for any locality in a Dillon rule state, and that is that you all do not put on us any unfunded mandates, and that's not just programs and services, but any good things that require additional admin plussing up is also a problem. It's always a problem philosophically. It's especially problematic during this year where we are trimming our workforce as much as possible in response to the budget outlook for the pandemic. So we ask, as you always are, to be especially mindful of that. Two other items that have been a part of this section in the past, thankfully, are no longer due to actions this past year. You know, you'll recall from 2019, gun reform or gun violence prevention measures was a key part of our general government priority list. Thank you all. Job extremely well done. And then, of course, one of the other items was redistricting, nonpartisan redistricting, and the people of the Commonwealth have had their say on that. But rest assured, we've added two more to this bucket to ensure that we had a robust, area for you to work on. We have talked about broadband authority, so I will not explain that issue except to identify just what might be an area of immediate action while we're waiting to try and figure out how we solve these problems overall in the Commonwealth, as you all described so well. There are issues about rural access, there are issues about urban affordability, and there's no real easy one solution for all of those issues. But one of the things that we were especially concerned with during the pandemic was our inability to take the infrastructure that the public had already invested it in and then being able to deploy it for the needs of distance learning, for telework, and for telehealth, which disproportionately impacts lower income people, people of color. And it's an extreme inefficiency given that we've got the ability to deploy that infrastructure. So while we're trying to figure out the larger issues of broadband, perhaps there's an area to focus on what can be done for localities who have the means during an emergency, realize you want to keep it as narrow as possible, but during an emergency to be able to deploy their infrastructure in whatever way is needed to meet the general needs of the public. So that just might be an area that you can focus on for this year. And Delegate Levine, you're interested in meetings, and we are as well. Having gone through this experience this year, we have seen the value of virtual meetings, and we recognize that there may be some iterative steps that you need to take in order to loosen up the restrictions on our doing virtual meetings. We support all of those incremental steps, but I hope I'm not speaking too far out of school with my colleagues to say that ultimately we might be interested in seeing the state code not really have any bias against virtual meetings as a way for localities or other regional bodies to conduct business. Obviously you want to put guardrails around notice and quorums and all of that. We don't object to any of those issues, but we have found that there's a great opportunity, if deployed well, that virtual meetings can enhance public participation, can enable us to bring voices that traditionally are kept apart from local government to the table, and only being able to do those in extraordinary circumstances and under certain conditions is not in the long-term best interest of a high-functioning local government. So I'll stop there just because I know Delegate Levine had some comments on that before I go into my next section.
Yep. Delegate Levine?
So, yeah, so I have been working very hard on giving you local authority for virtual meetings. I actually began this task last year before COVID. And frankly, Ms. Crystal has done a good job in arguing the case, given, frankly, the personal problems that she faced. And the Vice Mayor of Alexandria, Elizabeth Bennett Parker, had similar personal problems. And so long before COVID, and I say personal problems, these are serious things. I don't mean to suggest that they were in any way minor. Katie Crystal taking care of her son and Elizabeth Bennett Parker taking care of her mother. But it's obviously very important that public servants be allowed to take care of their family in serious medical situations and still do the work that they were elected to do. And the same is true for boards and commissions, who are also appointed. So long before COVID, I put in a bill that allowed folks to take care of their family members in these kinds of situations, and also allowed up to 10% of the meetings to declare a personal matter on the record and be virtual. That bill's been going, that bill passed the House, and the Senate said, we want the FOIA Council to hear it. So, okay, so we've been having the FOIA Council hear it all this year. We've been through 2 subcommittee meetings, and actually got it increased to 25%, which is good. So totally apart from COVID, which I'll get to in a minute, the idea is even in ordinary years without an emergency, we're approaching what you want, Mr. Dorsey, but we're not quite there yet. But 25% is still a lot of your meetings that you could attend. You'd have to give the reason, and you'd have to have your council member, your co-board members agree, and so forth. And so we're going to the full FOIA Council on December 2nd, and hopefully they'll agree, and then I'll put forward the bill this year. There is not, however, enough support to go all the way you suggest. But this is a step. Let's see how this goes. And, maybe in a couple of years, there will be that support. But I think this is a substantial step forward. Again, that's apart from COVID. With COVID, I've been pushing to give y'all really complete authority to do whatever you want. I think when there's a declared emergency, you should be able to meet virtually, all of you, always with transparency. All these things are with transparency. Transparency, I'm the chair of the Virginia Transparency Caucus. It's absolutely important. The public see everything, hear everything, be able to participate. That's a critical part of all this. But with that being said, that you could meet virtually in a time of emergency, with really no other conditions. There is some convoluted language that, frankly, I'm trying to get rid of that suggests that you can only meet to discuss the emergency for 30 days, and then you can discuss other things. I think all of these are needless red tape for you folks. I think we should simply say, if the governor declares an emergency, and these are severe emergencies. This is not, I don't know, the electricity isn't working in part of the building. This is the kind of stuff where it's not practical to meet. It's not safe to meet. I mean, you look at the language statute. These are serious things like COVID, things like a bomb threat, things like a fire. Really, this is not minor stuff. That if there's a state emergency or local emergency, I don't want to restrict what you can talk about. I don't want Mark Schwartz to have to say, well, you can talk about this, but you can't talk about that. I think that's silly. And so I worked, and the draft that's going through FOIA Council now is a draft to basically say you can talk about whatever you want, do your business as usual if there's a declared emergency. Still fighting for you on that front, but I am working to get that part for you. This may come in one bill. It may come as 2 bills. I may put the first bill forward myself, and Delegate Sullivan may put forward the second bill. But I think both are very important to your functioning, and I'm working hard on it.
Well, we welcome those efforts and support you wholeheartedly, and you let us know what we can do to help.
I already told Ms. Crystal I wanted to come testify because she has a compelling story to tell.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't have to travel far.
That's true.
I will say it was really underscored the point that I could testify from home.
Yep.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. And just to underscore, I think, two bills, we absolutely have to have the ability to go past June 30th, and extend that. That's absolute. The other will be great to have, but that we can take more time to work on that. But we absolutely need to be able to continue to do what we're doing right now. So thank you. Mr. Dorsey, back to you.
All right, my other section, I can go through this quickly, is public safety, section G in the document. And these will look familiar because they are holdovers from prior years. One is to see an increase in the jail per diem. And Delegate Hope, thank you very much. We know that this is a priority for you and that you've tried on this effort to put the money into the budget. As you all know, the reason this is a priority for us is because in Arlington, a little over 20% of our jail funding comes from the state. Northern Virginia region is similarly situated with relatively low reimbursement rates compared to the rest of the Commonwealth. And this is despite the fact that we are pretty efficient with our funding. And that's a significant local burden for funding jails, and it hasn't been adjusted enough over the last decade to keep pace with inflation. So I know, Delegate Hope, you have looked to plus that up and then index it to inflation. Those are efforts that we support. And it also relates to number 2 on the public safety priority list, support for diversion programs. In Arlington, we have long had our drug court, recently our mental health court. These are really important efforts to create not only a better, more efficacious criminal justice system, but it leads to the efficiency in our jail population that I was just describing. And we ask that you support those efforts with the flexibility for localities to pursue these with as little impediment from the state court apparatus as possible. And then the third one is something that there's been a lot of progress on in the Commonwealth, Next Generation 911. But we are fully bought into the whole idea that this is the way to deliver faster, more resilient emergency communication services, and having the ability for people to communicate by voice, by text, photo, and video is just an incredible step up. And we just encourage you to make sure that, one, the efforts that are already in place to look at implementation of this in the Commonwealth proceed, and that the funding is made available to make it happen. This can't be borne by the localities on an ongoing basis without state support. So we just want you to keep an eye out for that, because it's going to help overall, not only in the provision of emergency services, but it's going to I think, help the bottom line for both local and state governments, just with how efficient we'll become in delivering those things. I think that's that.
I think that's it. Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. I see Senator Favolas got her hand up. You're muted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to raise an issue, perhaps we should discuss it another time, but the General Assembly just passed, as you probably are aware, a lot of transformational legislation regarding police reform and criminal justice reform. And one of the cornerstones of our legislative efforts has been intersecting policing with mental health services. And we, of course, I'm sure you're aware, passed this law called the Marcus Alert. Over a period of time, all local governments around the Commonwealth will have to have some kind of crisis intervention program in their jurisdiction, and this crisis intervention program would be expected to be part of the public safety arena. I think all of us would be interested in learning how Arlington is going to move forward in implementing the Marcus Alert, and what additional funding you may be expecting from the state, what technical assistance in terms of best practices. So I just want to put that on your agenda for perhaps a future meeting after our session.
Sure.
Thank you.
I don't
And
know.
that's also very timely. We have a police practices group that is chewing over these issues within the larger conversation about how we structure responding to people in mental health crisis. So when that process concludes, we'll have a better handle as to what our timetable will be and what our program will be for implementing Marcus Alert legislation within the larger delivery of services. We got some interesting ideas that are being discussed. So
it'd be great to offer us a briefing and a conversation on that.
Absolutely.
We'd be happy to do that. And then I also, just in case, I mean, I know you know, but some people watching might not. We already do quite a bit. We have crisis intervention teams. I don't know, Mr. Schwartz, if you want to talk a little bit about what we do currently.
I think we do have crisis intervention teams. What Senator Favola talked about, which is focusing more on a co-responder model, is exactly what the police practices group is focusing on right now. And so I think I'm virtually certain there will be proposals, and appreciate the reference that Senator Favola made to the possibility of some state funding to assist us with that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Delegate Hope.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, this is all part of STEP Virginia that's going to take several years to roll out throughout the whole Commonwealth. And I don't know where Arlington will be on that continuum, but I know a number of localities are investing into some program of trying to have these mental health counselors embedded into law enforcement. To the issue of CIT, we did pass police reform as part of that. CIT training in the academies. And so now everyone coming out of the police academies will have CIT training. For those that are doing in-service training, which they have to do about 40 hours every 2 years, there will be some abbreviated de-escalation techniques, or how to interact with people with disabilities, substance abuse, mental illness. And so that it's not a full CIT training for those in-service training hours, but they will get some abbreviated version of that, so it continues to be part of our, and as it rolls out, but through the pipeline of law enforcement officers, will get that at some point in their career.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, and obviously, as you know, we've done a lot of, not that we can't get better, and we're really working on it and looking at the model, but we have been doing quite a bit, because the intersection of mental health and policing is major and been important for a long time. And I think any forward-looking police force has been looking at that for a while. Thank you. All right. I think that brings us to Mr. Karantonis, if you would take it away and talk a little bit about land use and housing, as well as civil rights initiatives.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our entire delegation for representing us in Richmond that well. We all have been, very attentive to your efforts this in the regular session and the very, very, very long special session. You have found even time to do also a lot on housing. I know that. Right now in this COVID crisis, every possible housing issue that we have has been exacerbated, and I know that you know that, and that you have already responded to that. It is an evergreen on our list starting with zoning and our the preservation of our ability and enhancement of our ability to actually being able to tailor zoning solutions for our community here as Arlington is growing, as Arlington is changing. This particular year, as you have been observing, we have an additional focus on equity and on our ability to shape and tailor housing and zoning and study zoning in a way that restores some of the inequities that have been accumulating over many decades in Arlington. So we want to preserve that. We really ask you to help us to resist any tendency to restrict local zoning authority or to make the local zoning process very, very, very difficult. So we need really to be able to calibrate that. The other thing that's really very current, because we are facing a significant pressure, as you know, with evictions, and is the ability to add in eviction notices that unfortunately they're already being issued to tenants, but they will probably be issued even more, regardless of everything that we all together are doing to stall or to avoid evictions, is to include in each and every eviction notice contact information for legal assistance. We found out in very, very practical terms that when tenants have good legal representation, their chance to reverse the very grave consequences of an eviction, especially in a pandemic, increase exponentially. So the numbers, the narrative that we get from legal services that work with tenants are really very encouraging, and we would like that every single tenant that gets such a notification has at least the first-hand information that they have ways to fight their eviction. So that on housing, I don't know if you have any questions on this or any specifics.
I see two hands up, so we go with Delegate Hope first and then Delegate Lopez. Patrick?
You say Hope, I don't have my hand up.
Oh, yeah, you do, at least as far as I can see. No, that's fine.
I'm sorry.
Nope, no problem. Delegate Lopez.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback what Taka said. I had that bill in last year about having all of the notices to have the numbers for the folks. Didn't get out of general laws last year, but it's something that we'll work on again.
Yeah, we really see that in practice right now. It's really very, very helpful. We can testify and show with practical examples, and practical statistics that this is really working. And thank you to everybody for significantly increasing the appropriations in the Housing Trust Fund, and we look forward to even a sturdier and more robust trust fund as we go.
Well, what's the old joke? Never let a crisis not be an opportunity here. We've been able to take the Housing Trust Fund from $7.5 million just 5 years ago to around $85 million, simply because of the clarity that everyone has about the need right now because of COVID-19. And so the issue for us now is to maintain that level and increase it, and then continue to develop affordable housing in every corner of the Commonwealth, because it's not just an urban problem, it's a rural and ex-urban problem as well.
Yes, and as an urban problem, I think that all your colleagues, I hope that they realize that this is also an important solution that the Northern Virginia economy needs in order to be the locomotive of the Commonwealth. Housing is really critical, and it drags us down every time we cannot provide a solution there. On civil rights initiatives, keeping it simple but substantial, immigration rights are civil rights. We are asking you in our document to oppose any state mandate that makes our local law enforcement even remotely having to evaluate the immigration status of immigrants. We are coming through a period of 4 years of an absolute terror regime, of a situation where our residents live in fear still. Still ongoing, where we have seen dramatic disruption for families. We have seen deportations. And there are still a lot of gray areas where local law enforcement, even without intention, will end up helping, quote unquote, federal enforcement on immigration. We really want that local enforcement has absolutely no business, and it does really not help us to have absolute no business with working for federal enforcement here.
Can I just raise something really quickly? It's about what Takas just said. I've been working now for a couple months with several statewide groups, including the ACLU, to respond to a few court cases that went before the state Supreme Court. And one of my 7 bills this year will be to ban 287G agreements across the Commonwealth of Virginia.
That would be great. We are not participating in the program, but we really want even the last gray area to disappear there.
Yeah.
Yeah, some change across the river that'll start to happen. And then, yeah, Mr. Carantonis, I think you have one more area.
And the last one is about human trafficking. Especially in 2019, we had some, significant intervention. Human trafficking takes many shapes, and we have been asking for support for educating and improving the capacity of law enforcement to cope with that.
All right, Senator Favola, you had a question.
Yes, so a comment on human trafficking. I am working with some healthcare providers in Nova. In particular, we're going to try to get, I don't know if I'll do it this year, but we're going to try to get some money in to train healthcare providers on identifying signs of trafficking. So we would appreciate whatever support you may want to lend to that effort. I know I did work with Delegate Levine and Katie Crystal a few years ago to increase the number of sane trained nurses who can do the sexual assault nurse examination effort, which is related to sexual assault. We worked on getting grant dollars here into Nova through the Nova program. So I just wanted you to know we're working on that, and we'll keep you posted. And any information or local experience you have that might help us shape this training program for health professionals, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. I think that the poverty footprint of the COVID crisis is just an alarm sign that this is really compelling and urgent. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and that brings us to Mr. DeFerranti, who's got energy and the environment as well as human services and a whole lot of items. And I know he's not going to cover all of them, but touch on what seems to be, touch on a few. And obviously, if people have questions on things he hasn't touched on or anything else, we can have questions and discussion. Mr. DeFerranti, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start with the human services because, of course, it includes health, and in this time of COVID, it's a pressing priority. Just briefly, this is the end of our written package. If you have it with us, I think it's subsection J. But Delegate Hope, you mentioned STEP Virginia. I know you know of Deborah Warren, our Deputy HHS Director. She is on the statewide effort to implement this. It is a priority for all of us, and I am not the liaison who is, I think Ms. Crystal is liaison, but we are all aware, and implementing this with additional funding is key, as well as an implementation time period that is workable. I know you are an expert on this. So I'll just touch briefly on a couple other and then come back unless Madam Chair, you want to go to questions on STEP VA right now.
Why don't you just touch on a couple others real quick, and then I see hands going up, but why don't we just get through that section and we'll then take over.
Sure. So second, I would just talk about funding for COVID testing. Local funding is key. We've seen this with, I think you each are aware of, we have been desperate to get the funding that has been laid out in steps from the governor's office. And now just was in a conversation today where making sure all that money is spent by December 31st is critical. So we're going to need those resources. That's touched on in item 7 and item 9. 9 is funding for localities to respond to COVID-19. It's huge. And I know that each of you is aware of the importance of childcare in this difficult moment. There's a need for all of Arlington, but there's also a need that perhaps is more acute in certain instances for low-income students. And so childcare funding is another key piece. There are other items, but I'll just summarize last on this healthcare area. There's psychiatric beds, which is a longstanding issue, but I know that several of you have led on long-term care and infection prevention. But certainly I've seen statements from Delegate Hope, but also from others of you, improving the long-term care staffing standards and also infection prevention is so critical. So that's sort of a brief overview of our health and human services priorities. And over to you, Madam Chair, for questions.
Well done, Mr. DeFerranti. I think in the order I saw them, I'll go to Delegate Hope, Senator Favola, and Delegate Levine. Patrick?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that, Mr. DeFerranti. I'm going to mention just a couple of these. On number 4, the mandatory outpatient treatment, I'm going to bring a bill. This is probably 4 years in a row, but I think this is the magic time that we're going to really do some clear reforms on mandatory outpatient treatment. And, you know, inpatient treatment, involuntary inpatient treatment is a big deal, taking away someone's civil rights. And we just throughout the state just don't have that flexibility to do some outpatient. And so we're going to clean up the code, but we're also going to make it a little bit more of a better option for CSBs, because I think that relates to number 3. I do think it will free up psychiatric beds if we can get this mandatory outpatient treatment. Outpatient is much better than inpatient if you can do it. And so I'm confident that we're going to get that passed. I do want to mention long-term care staffing standards. This is a top priority of the Joint Commission on Healthcare. I think for probably at least 2 decades. I think we need to do a better job in staffing and the quality and training of staffing that are in long-term care. I'm talking about nursing home and assisted living. And I do think that the study will also include community-based living as well. So think of group homes for people with mental illness and intellectual disabilities. Take a look at the quality of staffing in those areas as well. But it's pretty clear that the pandemic has shone a spotlight on the disparity of care of what's happened in these congregate living settings. And so if we can get a silver lining out of this, I think that we will take a long-term look at this for the Joint Commission on Healthcare. So we will study this in the 2021 year and have recommendations. And Delegate Vivian Watts has introduced a bill on staffing standards for probably 20 years. And it's about a $40 million problem. I mean, it's not just the nursing facilities that are to blame here. The reimbursement structure that we have in the Commonwealth for Medicaid in particular is very low. And, you know, it just has hurt the ability to hire quality staff and also the number needed to care for people, especially in a time of crisis. So we're going to take a hard look at it. We're committed to it. This is a strategic effort, and we're going to identify funding to deal with this problem in the 2022 session. But I want you to know that it's going on now. It's planned, and I think we have a good opportunity to take a crack at this problem.
Great. Thanks. Yeah. Senator Favola, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Patrick Hope did a great job of sort of giving you an overview of where we are on some of these issues. You should know that because COVID is such a dramatic change and is requiring so many different strategies in our healthcare sector so we can cope with it and hopefully keep people safe. We have committed a pay raise to employees working in nursing homes, $20 a day per staff person, and that will be taking effect. So we're trying to reduce turnover. We're acknowledging that the work is not only challenging, it's particularly challenging in these times of COVID. So we are making some effort right now to address the quality of care. And on the child care issue, you probably are aware, but we did $65 million in the budget that we just tweaked. And those dollars will be going out through a grant program. So if Arlington chooses to put in an application and maybe co-apply with using a public building, a school building, or a community center, or even with a nonprofit. I think if we could get partnerships together and you go ahead and apply for the funding, I think you'd stand a good chance. So, they'll be competitive, but we're trying very hard to disperse the money by region. So I just wanted to put that on the table. I'm sure your folks are following all this. I'm happy to provide details if you want me to send them to Deborah Warren or somebody else or Anita Friedman.
I think you should feel free to send something to them. They may know, but they may not. Please do, I think.
Okay.
This is Pat. Send it to me and I'll make sure they get it.
Okay, right. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
I'm just so used to working with Anita Friedman and Deborah Warren. They just come right by.
Just as long as they get it, it's fine. Thank you.
Like they're an extension of my staff. But yes, thank you, Pat. Of course, I know you'll get it to them.
Great. Delegate Levine, waiting patiently again.
Madam Chair, so one of the things that's happening this year that we got in last year, something I've been working on for a few years now, has to do with guardianship reform. And it relates, frankly, to COVID. It relates to congregate settings. It relates to people who have diminished capacity. I think Alzheimer's patients would be the classic example, though there are other examples. And making sure that they're being taken care of by a system, particularly when family members want to take care of them. I just want you to know the study is undergoing this year. So if you hear of problems in congregate settings in Arlington, let me know or participate in the study. And then in 22, when we do big things, we're going to look at some real good reform in that, and take the lessons we learned, frankly, from the tragedies that have happened this year with COVID into consideration. And the other thing I wanted to say was that I just wanted to ask you just sort of how you're coping. It sounds like you've got hospitalization, you've got PPE. How about the testing? Can you do turnaround tests in Arlington pretty quickly? Do you need any state aid just coping with the healthcare aspects of COVID? How you coming? And I don't know if that's for Madam Chair or Mr. DeFerrante.
Well, actually, I would like to ask I think our manager has got most of the details. He briefs us regularly, so I'd go directly to the source, I think.
Yes, so thank you, Delegate Levine, for that question. As far as testing resources, we continue to have the 2 fixed testing sites, one at the Quincy Street property across from Washington Liberty High School, and the other at Arlington Middle. We also, as recently as today, we have been getting a lot of cooperation from the state to do point prevalence testing where there have been outbreaks at long-term care facilities. And so we are getting assistance with that. And also we have seen the private sector, which includes Inova and some other companies that we have relationships, step in to fill the void. At this point, we have a lot of demand in the community and a little bit hit or miss about whether we're getting rapid tests or not. But we feel like we're getting the kind of cooperation we need from the state. Interestingly, one of the issues that has come up is that we find more people are making use of rapid tests in their home. And that presents a little bit of a public health issue for us because when they've been going to healthcare providers, we get those reports. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with that issue of people testing themselves and they actually showing up positive and making sure they report into the system. So that's a whole new issue that's come up recently, but we feel like we're doing okay at the moment.
Could I ask briefly about waiting times? 3 times I want to know. If someone wants a test, how long do they have to wait before they can get one? Do you have any lines to get those tests? And lastly, what's your average time for returning of tests once someone gets one?
Yeah, everyone has been able to get a test that wants one on the day they want to get it. As far as the reporting back time on test results, still averaging 2-3 days on ones where we're not having the rapid tests. That has gotten a little bit better, but and I think you may have asked a third question.
The third one's, are there any lines at your facilities? Or I know you had like a drive-in at one point. Or if someone, you said people can get it the day they want it. Do they have to wait an hour? Do they wait 10 minutes? Do they wait several hours?
You know, I don't know that answer to that question. I know that, for example, at Arlington Mill over the last few days, there's been increased demand. So I don't think people can walk right in and get it. I think there is some waiting that's going on. I don't have the precise amounts, though.
But it's not extended, not like more than an hour or two, certainly. You don't know.
I
can report I visited both sites recently and never saw significant queuing.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we did early on when we had those major events, but that was early on. Mr. Carantonis?
Yeah, I was in Arlington Mill as well, and there was only minimal queuing, but the demand is growing. And there is also discussion in the community about surveillance testing when we talk about opening schools at some point, et cetera. I mean, this is a conversation that we will continue to be having. Any additional resources are really welcome in this. We are a high population density area, so we cannot have enough of testing right now, especially when our case load is and infectiousness is increasing because of the current situation.
Well, we're hoping we'll get some federal money in, either in the lame duck or with the new president, and then pass it through the state on to you. That's a hope and a wish. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Mr. DeFranti, I think we're to energy and the environment. Bring us on in.
Sure. So I will be brief on that. I did want to the manager, we have been testing, trying to reach most at-risk populations, and that's an equity-based strategy that really the whole board and the manager have, and I just wanted to mention it because everything else was covered. But we're focusing at Arlington Mill, and we're focusing at Drew, and we're also trying to make sure we reach the whole community.
Considering the conversations that we've had over the last summer with the governor's office and the administration, and with Mark Schwartz and everyone here, we really do appreciate that. That's meant a great deal. So thank you for that.
Sure. So, and then just Delegate Hope, you've been a bully pulpit on our senior centers, and Senator Favola, you actually do seem like you work hand in glove with Ms. Warren. So you guys have been real leaders. I think we all feel lucky that you're part of our delegation because you're huge leaders in this area. So enough, and on to the environment. We got 6 of our priorities, as you know, done last year. And so that I see Delegate Lopez smiling, and that is a lot of years of getting the legislative majority to enact some of them. I will say we have a couple of items, and I'll just cover them very briefly. Consumer choice on electricity is one of our priorities, so that's on climate change and energy. There is a energy, essentially green bank, that is another priority for the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy. And then we have 2 return items that have been huge priorities locally, as you know, which is the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund and preserving trees. I know there's a study that is going to be done soon that Ms. Carroll did a great work on. So those are a number of our priorities. There's one that we've discussed a little bit in our commission over the past week or so, which is local option, that local ability to do energy benchmarking, which is another one. But those are our high-level priorities on the environment.
Thank you, Mr. DeFranti. Delegate Levine, I see your hand up. You're on mute.
Thank you. On the issue of the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund, we've had problems in Alexandria, not just in Old Town, which is flooded for years, but Del Rey has suffered some real flash floods in July and September. I'd be curious if you had any of them in Arlington. One of the things we're looking at doing, and I don't know whether I'll put in this legislation or perhaps Delegate Herring will, or perhaps Senator Eben will, but legislation to deal with not just stormwater that has extra nutrients, but actually just too much water. so much water that comes down in a flash flood that it floods basements. And I don't know whether you've had that problem in Arlington. Maybe you could share that with me. But if you have, then maybe you can support our efforts that we're doing in Alexandria as well to try to address, not just stormwater with too much nutrients, but actually just too much water.
We're it's a major issue for us, Mr. Levy. I don't remember if you remember the July 8th storm that we had, a year and a half ago. Basically, Mother Nature took a bucket and upended it over us. And that's kind of what's happening. And it's causing a lot of damage, and it's a major issue for us. In fact, in our capital improvement program, we're holding back on a lot of different expenditures, but we're moving forward on stormwater because we have to, and a lot of it is to respond to climate change. So it's not just the rising of the waters; it's these rain events that are just really difficult to deal with, particularly in an area where a lot of streams were undergrounded and put in pipes, and there's nowhere for the water to go, and we've got to fix that. So we're embarking on a number of big projects on that. So thank you. I think a lot of hands up. I think Delegate Lopez, yours was next, I believe. I'm trying to follow in order, but.
My question was, can the staff send me some of the information your angle on the Green Bank? I've heard, I know of the Green Climate Bank or something like that at the state level. It's an interesting theory. It's been put into practice in several parts of the country. I'm curious as to how Arlington is envisioning this in the Commonwealth. And so, I've heard from activists about it. I've heard from several folks about it. I'd just love to see what the county thinks. So if that can be sent around to all of us, that'd be great.
Pat. This is Pat. I'll send it to you tonight.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking. Delegate Hope.
On the tree preservation issue, I do think we did make some progress with the bill we passed this year. And I don't believe it's a study. Pat Carroll, you might want to correct me. I know the governor's promulgating regulations for what we passed, but I don't believe it's a study.
Two bills. It was an embarrassment of riches. We had two bills. There was your bill, and DEQ, aka the State Water Control Board, is doing a study. Or they're putting together regulations. They've been doing some presentations around the state about what they're doing. The second one was trees as BMPs, whether currently DEQ has a weighting factor for meadows and for forests for how much water they trees take out of the ground, or meadows do, and also for nutrients, but they don't have anything for individual trees. Okay. So DEQ is going to do a study on that. That was a David Bulova bill. But sadly, because of the pandemic, it's been delayed a year.
Yeah.
So it will be done next year.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. The reason why I brought it up is I really want to try to create some momentum or some sense of urgency to act in this area. And so what I was contemplating doing was putting in a budget amendment to direct the DEQ to set up a work group of all stakeholders to figure out if there's a way that we can come up with some legislation to create some incentives that we can all find some consensus on to preserve mature trees or the planting of trees. And so if you can help me with some language on that, but basically that's what I want to do, because again, I think it would build us some momentum for 2022. So start something in 2021 so we can do something, because I don't like putting this issue off any further.
No, you're right. I think it's really crucial. So we will get you, I think we'll be pleased to get you some language, or at least some thoughts. When do you need that by? What's your deadline?
Well, because it's a budget language, I think we have up until we go into session, a few days after we have to put in our budget amendments. But I think we have some time.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank
Pat, Ms. Carroll, did you want to say something?
The state forester was also assigned by the governor under the water improvement plan that the governor announced in August of 2019, and he was given a responsibility for the urban tree canopy, and he's been doing some studies and whatever. So Delegate Hope, I'll call you and we can talk about that and come up with a good plan.
Great, but we'll want to get you whatever you need that we can provide. So, and we just are launching our own forestry and natural resources plan, renewal. So we're doing a lot of work and study too, although that'll be over time. But we're looking at it here. So, all right, thank you. I think we've had a great discussion. Or at least I don't know about you all, but I feel like it's been pretty good back and forth. The last part of the agenda, we've got discussion of initiatives from our delegation, and I know you've all touched on a number of things throughout the discussion, which is great. Is there anything anybody would want to add from our delegation that you think we ought to know about on some initiatives you've got coming up?
Sure. And I did want to say I communicated with Senator Marsden about the study or the pilot project that Amazon was going to do with the robots. And I understand it's been delayed till next spring or summer. They had a site picked out, but they're limited as to what they control. You are limited as what you can control, but you do have some local authority, he said. But he claims that the service is designed more for suburbs, places that have driveways, than like Wilson Boulevard or Fairfax Drive, that sort of thing. Just wanted to update you on that.
Well, it's really nice that was in the legislation so that if they change their minds, right?
Well, see after the pilot if that's needed. But in terms of my own legislation, I just wanted to mention I'm pursuing the legalization of marijuana, which may be a bit significant for this year, but the governor's behind it now. I've got a bill to repeal the marriage amendment and replace it with an affirmative right to marry for adults of the same gender or of either gender. Unlawful eviction to provide for a private cause of action. A ban on weapons in state buildings, which is the current policy, but to make it in the Code of Virginia rather than just an executive order. For elections legislation to make more permanent the ballot drop boxes that we saw in this past election, as well as ballot curing and something on voting access for the blind we're working on. The one thing Delegate Levine mentioned was the stormwater. I've got a bill for Alexandria to provide for, they already have a local stormwater fund on how they can spend that fund. In terms of dealing with private homes, if there's a group of homes that are impacted, that they could benefit private homeowners with that if they chose to. And the other I wanted to mention was to allow localities to electronically file for conflict of interest, or really I should say economic interest statements. Right now, I believe you have to fill out those forms on paper. At the state level, we fill it out electronically. Just something else I'm working on. And I did want to also mention, Mr. Karantonis was talking about evictions. I sought and got Amazon to contribute $3 million to local legal aid for people who are facing eviction. They announced that this past Monday. So, not everything we want, but certainly a good corporate citizen stepping forward with some help.
Yes, they have been helping. It's great. Thank you. Any other delegates, senators that I'd like to add? Yes, Delegate Lopez.
I'll defer to Barbara. Senator.
Oh, thank you, Alfonso. I will just quickly highlight, I won't go over my whole list, but some of the issues you might be interested in. I am working on a reinsurance program in an effort to keep insurance premiums, the rate of increase, to slow that increase and to perhaps keep insurance premiums level. So I'm working with the governor on that. And I do have a bill that would provide a private option for employers to purchase insurance to cover paid family medical leave. So we'll see how that goes. I have 4 other bills in the healthcare area, all important, but I won't go over them. Patrick Hope and I are working on the care of pregnant women in jails, and that's turning out to be quite an interesting conversation because we're looking at both regional jails, state prisons, and the juvenile justice system. I am going to carry a bill that will give local governments the authority to enforce the ABC licenses in restaurants. So ABC's been doing a fine job, and they have enough staff, and we haven't had any complaints, but it's enabling legislation. You may want it in your back pocket going forward. And on the gun safety issue, I was hesitant to put this bill in, but I'm only following the federal law where myself and Delegate Murphy, I believe, is putting it in the House, but we want to ban firearms if somebody's actually been convicted of assaulting a family member. So we'll see how that goes. And by the way, my friends here in the House of Delegates, you've been very, very supportive on all of these bills. And I appreciate that because the Senate, we did do a good job in our gun safety bills, but we certainly did limit ourselves on what we were going to take on. So that's a quick overview. I'm, always here to help. I've got some transportation bills and, I'm trying to protect motorcyclists. We're doing a study on that and some other transportation bills, which I will be able to give you more detail probably at the end of the week. By the way, thank you. And it is a pleasure working with you, Libby, and your delegation, your county board members. You're wonderful. And Pat Carroll is an extraordinarily good legislative liaison. So.
Well, thank you. Well, we know you absolutely understand our positions, having been here. I saw Delegate Lopez's hand up, and then I'll go to Mr. Dorsey and then to Delegate Levine, if that's all right.
Sure.
Delegate Lopez.
If the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us anything, it's that some of the legislative, some of the stuff in the code is counterproductive. And so there's a bill that was passed by Dave Albo in 2005. It's HB 1798. And I would move to overturn that because it basically states that no state funding can be used to assist undocumented populations. And considering what we know about pandemics, that is actually counterproductive. Similar gun bill that I've talked to Patrick about regarding right now, the default proceed measures in the state are that if someone tries to buy a gun and they go through the NICS system and they don't get anything response back from the NICS system within one business day, well, then you have to proceed to sell the gun to the individual. The FBI for years has said that should be 5 business days to allow the NICS system to work. And so I'm going to put that legislation in again to make sure that we follow what the FBI best practices are. Like I said before, I want to try to ban 287G agreements in the state. I've been working for a long time now on something called the Virginia Safe Drinking Water Act. There are a significant number of places around the state, urban, suburban, and mostly rural, where the standards for lead and copper are 15 parts per billion in the water, in safe drinking water. We have parts of Virginia where it's 50 parts per billion, 450 parts per billion, 650 parts per billion. We're not at Flint, Michigan levels, but if you're immunosuppressed or elderly or an infant, do not drink the drinking water in some of the communities in Virginia. And the fact that we don't focus on that enough is problematic for me. And then also 2 other bills. One is on pre-registration for 16-year-olds to encourage participation in the voting process. This is a bill I put in the last couple of years. I think we have some interesting support for it this year. And then also working closely with your county attorney on legislation to address some public safety and restaurant issues in certain parts of the county. That I'm still waiting on language from the county attorney. Love to make sure we get that. Our deadline, of course, for pre-filing is Monday the 30th. So as soon as we can get that, we'd be really appreciated.
Well, Steve's here on the call, so I think he heard that. So thank you.
A couple other bills that are focused more on some social safety net and environmental issues. But along those same lines, in terms of budgetary requests, we're going to try to get tuition assistance grants for in-state tuition through the budget, working with Janet Howell and Senator Hashmi on getting that done. It's around $800,000. Also, a couple of constitutional amendments regarding the environment and improving that in terms of environmental justice. And then also, I was a member of the Commonwealth Coalition back in when the Marshall-Newman Amendment was happening, trying to fight the Marshall-Newman Amendment, and we'll be working very diligently to support Senator Evans' effort to overturn the Marshall-Newman Amendment on the House side. And that's it. There's a lot to do this year, but it's going to be a very interesting session. Thanks for your support.
Thank you. Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Delegate Lopez, thank you so much for being interested in reserving some space maybe to put forward something to deal with restaurants or other establishments that are posing a hazard to the community. You know, it's not just the recent example that's in your district this year that brings this concern. It seems that every year we kind of have a problem actor, and we lament that we don't have the ability ultimately, as many other communities do, to ultimately determine whether or not, a problematic business to dictate the terms under which it's allowed to operate. So hopefully you can work with our attorney and figure out something that passes muster with the rest of your colleagues in the Assembly. But it's a critical need, one that that recurs for us much more often than just the recent example that you're familiar with.
Right.
And we're not the only locality in Virginia that has these issues.
Right.
We're not.
Thank you. Delegate Levine.
So I'm still deciding what I can fit into my 7, but I'll just name some things that are likely to come from me this year. I mentioned the bill on giving virtual meetings for localities, which I know is most up your alley. I'm bringing back the National Popular Vote bill. I'm going to bring back my bill on duty of police officers to report when they see misconduct, which includes adding sexual orientation, gender identity to racial profiling standards. I'd like to, if there's room in my bucket list, I've got it there in the drafting form, a bill to prohibit firearms at polling places. I think there's been a lot of concern, particularly in this election, about voter intimidation, and our statute of voter intimidation is very loose. And I think just a prohibition, obviously not law enforcement, but a prohibition on ordinary citizens bringing guns to polling places, I think is a really good idea, and also into counting and recount places. I will be putting in a bill to further refine the redistricting amendment to bring in more transparency. Supporters and opponents of the amendment, and obviously I opposed it, all said they wanted transparency in the process. There is virtually no transparency with regard if it goes to the Supreme Court, and I want to make sure that those hearings are transparent, they don't have ex-parte communications, and tighten up some language there, along with a new constitutional amendment to basically do full nonpartisan independent Citizens Commission to replace this one for the future. There's been a lot of discussion on that. Hopefully that can go forward. I'll also work on the constitutional amendment to get rid of Marshall-Newman and replace it with a requirement to not discriminate on the basis of marriage. I know that Senator Evans is doing that, and Delegate Lopez has mentioned that as well. We mentioned the flood stuff. What else? Looking down my list here what I haven't talked about. If there's room in my schedule, I want to get rid of faithless electors in Virginia. I think a lot about the presidential race this year. I know it doesn't come up again until 2024, but while it's on everybody's mind. Got a few others that I'm not sure whether I'll introduce or not, but that's things I'm thinking about this year.
Great, thank you. Appreciate your support on those items as well. Delegate Hope, your hand is up. Is it from before, or you have another?
Yeah. No, I just in the interest of time, I'll just describe one bill that I'm working on, and Senator Eben is part of my work group to create a tobacco retail license. So anyone who sells tobacco retail establishments in the Commonwealth to have to get licensed so that we can have a program to hire undercover, underage ABC inspectors to go in to ensure that they aren't selling to people underage. Our level is about at 20%, which is incredibly high. It's very close to the federal bar that where we lose federal funding if we don't create this program. Of course, the idea is not to take license away from anyone. The idea is to educate and train to ensure that they aren't selling to underage. We have ABC licensure requirements for alcohol. We need to have it for tobacco. And of course, as we're looking towards legalization of marijuana, that will also be the model that we'll have to use. So that's a bill that I'm planning to carry.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate Hope. Senator Fola?
No, I'm fine. Is my hand up?
It's up, but that's fine.
Oh, I apologize. I just
All
didn't.
right. No. Believe me, we go through this all the time. Delegate Levine, did you have something more, or are you just? All right. Great. I think I see no more hands up, and I just really would like to thank everybody. Felt like this was a pretty good discussion, actually, considering it's virtual and everything.
We covered a lot.
Yeah, it was a very good discussion.
Really, really appreciate it, and all the staff support, obviously from Pat Carroll and Steve. Mr. McIsaac is here to help you with drafting that you need.
Your county attorney there.
Mm-hmm. And so if there's anything you need from us, please let us know. We let you know when we need something from you. I think it's a good team we've got here. Really appreciate it, and hope everybody has a very safe, healthy, and happy Thanksgiving. It's going to be different this year, but it'll still be good. Like I say, there's still
a lot of Zoom toast, right?
A lot of Zoom toast.
I just want to thank you, Madam Chair, for reaching out to me. And I believe your other 4 colleagues all have my cell phone number. Don't hesitate to call. I'm happy, to talk to any one of you. I certainly lobby you when I want something, and you should feel free to lobby me when you want something.
All right. We have a mutual lobbying agreement. That works.
Let's call it a friendship agreement. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Happy
Everybody
Thanksgiving.
stay well. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Giving everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye.